Well, hello there, everybody. So I'm back with another spread, another reading on shadow work. And this is a little bit of an interesting one. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about something that may seem a little more personal and a little more individual than the other shadow work topics that I've covered, which have really been about addressing what I call the universal shadow, or how we use our shadow work, how we use our tarot readings to contribute to the healing of larger problems in the world and in the community. And so the topic for today is insecurity, which seems like a very kind of traditional individual shadow work topic. But one thing that I have learned in life from dealing with my own profound insecurities is that, and I'm going to be very upfront here, and this is particular to my own life lessons, so you may disagree with this, but I think it's true. There is an element of insecurity that is selfish, and I'll explain why. And the reading is going to explore how and why that's true. The thing that happens for those of us who tend to be more on the insecure end of the spectrum of self-confidence is certainly me. Again, I can't speak for everybody. This is just, a truth that I've found to be real for me, but also for people that I've met in the world who may not know they're doing this. When we're insecure, oftentimes we look for external validation. And what happens when that happens is we can frequently put the burden of security, of making ourselves feel secure, on others. And there are many ways we can do that. In my past, for example, I have really generous creative friends who really like my work, for example, and who, when I'm feeling down or insecure, will often make them act as a defense attorney for my creative being. So I make them, I'll say, oh, I have this thing I'm working on, or oh, my channel, or oh, this, or oh, my book, or whatever. Like, oh, it's just not good, and like I feel like and then my friends have to say, no, it's fine. You're so talented. You're so good, And they, we do that for each other. Like that's natural. It's inevitable. It's kind. It's positive. But it's also, when it happens a lot, it can be a little annoying. We can definitely take advantage of the generosity of others in some cases when we make the people in our lives act as our defense attorney for whatever it is, our existence, our creativity, our work, our feelings, it happens in romantic relationships. Like, oh, I don't feel like you love me enough, and maybe I did that wrong. I've done it so many times, like so many times, with friends, with partners, with whoever. At work we can do it with our bosses or with our teams. Like, I'm just not good at this anymore. Oh no, it's okay. So that's one way we do it, is we put the burden on others. Another way we do it is by presenting a false superiority. So sometimes, in order to make ourselves feel more secure, someone just walked by, sorry. In order to make ourselves feel more secure, we will project a false sense of grandeur, of confidence, that is meant to both make ourselves feel more powerful and also other people less so. And so we can cut people down, or we can exclude others by saying, oh, no, you're not quite there yet. You're not quite good enough. And so that's another way we make insecurity an armor that distances others and that hurts others by making them feel more insecure, so that we feel like we're higher on the totem pole, or the totem pole is like really not a very good analogy anymore, but we feel like we're higher on the ladder. The totem pole as an analogy probably should be retired for white Americans. At any rate, the point is that there are times when insecurity becomes a weapon, and we wound others in an attempt to make ourselves feel better, to make ourselves feel like one of the cool kids. No, you can't sit with us, because I have to save space for like the people who are kind. Like, sorry about it, but you're like not quite there yet. So those are two ways in which insecurity can become a burden on others. I think the first one is more common. I think we just need validation from friends and loved ones sometimes, and that is fine. It's just sometimes we take it too far too often. The other kind of insecurity, the weaponized insecurity, I see pop up in smaller communities, creative communities. I've seen it pop up in tarot communities because there is a sense of wanting to belong and feeling like we don't. And so we force ourselves to exclude others in an effort to make ourselves feel like we do, you know? And if we can't be part of the group we want to be part of, we create a group to exclude other people from, you know? And that, it happens constantly. It happens it happens in the high school journalism office. It happens on the team. It happens at work. It happens in communities like this one. It happens a fuck ton in the theater, let me tell you that. And it contributes to that universal shadow. So what we're going to look at is a reading that will help us explore the ways in which our insecurities are becoming a burden to others and how we can take ownership of them, release them, check our progress. I think that one of the reasons that I like this idea, and one of the things that I've learned in my life, is you sometimes don't want to deal with the work as an individual because it's like, oh, this is just about me, and it's about my, I'm not important enough. But like, if it becomes about the people in your life, you're more willing to do it. And so it's sort of like, okay, well, if I can't solve my own insecurities for me, can you see, like, I was driving with the moonroof open and I've got like a sun on the cap of my head. It's just becoming really obvious to me. Anyway, focus. What was I saying? Oh, when it's not about us, when it's about the people in our lives, we're sometimes more willing to say, yeah, I should work on that. So in this sense, it is part of the universal shadow. It's a little maybe smaller than the other things we've talked about, but it's part of it. And if we make healing our insecurities about protecting our loved ones from our own insecurities, that can go a long way. And so that's what the spread is really about. And I want to caution everyone, as always, this is not about self-flagellation. It's not about self-abuse. It's not about smacking ourselves around for being human. It's about looking at shadow work from the point of view of how we fit into the larger community. Now, we're looking at it from a slightly smaller slice of the world than the other pieces that we've done so far have looked, but it's the same. And the more of us that are owning our insecurities and working with our insecurities and healing our insecurities, the less likely we are to make it other people's problems, which means they can deal with theirs. And overall, across the board, everyone can heal and we can all live in a less insecure world. Another thing that's popping into my head now is that insecurity factors not only into our emotional state, but also into food insecurity, housing insecurity, etc. And so there are readings you could do as well. I didn't include this because I'm recording this after I did the example reading, but you could do readings about how I can contribute to lessening food insecurity and housing insecurity. What are things I can do? But honestly, you don't need a reading for that. You got to donate money to the right charities and foundations for that. But insecurity isn't just about ourselves. There's insecurity that plays out on a daily and very profound level. So I think it's also worth knowing as we work on ourselves that insecurity in a more environmental way is something that we should think about too. And so maybe that's something we add to this, as we work on our spreads dealing with the shadow work of insecurity, we also do a little work. Technology. I was very close to the end of that intro when my computer just suddenly decided it didn't want to record my face anymore. What I was saying was, as we're doing work on our own individual insecurity, maybe it's worth doing some work around insecurity on a larger scale, donating to food banks, donating to shelters, etc. And as we work on our own insecurities, we also look at the insecurity of the people in the world around us on a daily and environmental and physical level, and make that part of our process too. Because I think contributing to the healing of the universal shadow is not just about dealing with our own emotional state. It's about dealing with the fact that not everything is nice for everybody. Not everything is easy. Not everyone has the luxury of sitting down with a deck of cards and exploring their emotional state. Some of them are exploring how they're going to get food on the table for dinner, how they're going to clothe the kids for school, on Monday morning. So I think making when we're doing this kind of work, I think if we make a conscious effort to do external work in the world too, it doesn't have to, here's where I get my like Sally, what's her face, from the commercials in the 90s, for the price of a cup of coffee, but like I'm making fun of that, but for the price of a cup of coffee or whatever, you could, as you're doing this work of healing the internal insecurities, you could throw some change in every day and say, okay, I'm going to make a donation to the local food bank. I'm going to donate X. As I'm doing this work, I'm going to go through the closet and take out these great clothes that no longer fit, and I'm going to bring them to not the Salvation Army, because the Salvation Army discriminates against queer people, but there are other worthy organizations that don't discriminate. And by the way, while I'm saying this, queer people are less likely to get help and more likely to be homeless, because they're more likely to get kicked out of their homes for religious reasons, and they're more likely to be turned away by churches. So just know that. Anyway, so I do think that making sort of a social practice in addition to the internal practice is good and can help heal ourselves and the world. So, and that's really part of what we're trying to get to with this idea of universal shadow. So with that said, now that I've recaptured all of that from the stupid computer nonsense, I'm going to flip things around. We'll look at an example of the spread. It's not an example that I did specifically for me, although I think a lot of what the reading wound up saying applies to a lot of us. But just an example to show you how it flows. And I would love to hear your thoughts as you work through this and see how it feels as you go through. So as always, I hope you enjoy this, and we'll talk soon. All right. So our spread this time is pretty simple, but like everything else, it can be deceptively easy when you look at it on the page. And I think, as I've talked about in all of these examples, it's wise to really sit with them. And while I'm actually a fan of exploring the quick hits that come in with a spread, I think those first impressions really matter. I think in a spread like this, where we're exploring our own internal shadow, it's also good to sit with them and explore whether we're letting ourselves off the hook. So there's a balancing act with this, but here's how this one goes. So it's 5 positions like a lot of the other ones. Now, as you'll see in the example that I do, like all the other ones, I use 3 cards. I think 3 cards per position really goes a long way. I think it gives more context, it gives more color, and in these examples, you'll see it actually even creates a lot more narrative. So I would encourage that. You don't have to if you prefer to do 1 card for each, but I think 3 is the magic number for a lot of tarot. So the first position is one way I make my insecurity the burden of others, and that's really the focus of this reading. And as I said in the intro, look, it's important not to be too hard on ourselves because we're human. I think it's also important to look at the ways in which our behaviors impact others. And one of the things really that's behind this whole series of shadow work spreads is our participation in the larger universal shadow. This may be a little bit smaller than universal, but I think in a lot of ways, especially now in the world of social media, it's both easier to be insecure and easier to make our insecurities the burden of others. And that's what we're really about. So this isn't victim blaming. It's not about self-flagellation or self-abuse. It's just about looking at our insecurities from a different point of view. And as I said in the intro, or hopefully said in the intro, I'm recording this first, it's one way, it's one way to help us get over our insecurities, because when we make it about other people and the impact we're having on others, it's actually a little bit easier to sometimes sit back and say, okay, I really need to deal with my insecurities. So first position, how do I make or one way? And I guess that's key across the board. You'll notice one way, one impact, one way in a lot of these spreads. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can impact others, whether it's in defensiveness or unconscious bias, etc. One of the reasons why I chose to say one way for each of these positions is that I think there are multiple ways, and we can't boil the ocean. So we start with one way, and I think we can keep doing these spreads over and over and over again. So position 2, one impact of my insecurity on others. Position 3, one way I can take accountability for my insecurities. Position 4, one way I can secure that insecurity, which is to say release the insecurity. And then position 5 is how can I check my progress. So I have an example which now is currently sitting underneath my microphone. So I pull this away and move this over here. So this is an example. It's not particular to me. This is just an example. Again, I think that it's good to have these conversations in public. I'm not a big fan of putting my catharses out on the internet. So I did not, this isn't mine. But actually, I think a lot of what you'll see here is pretty universal too. But I think it's good to sit down with it. And then I neglected to put the credit in the slide, but this is the Gaian Tarot by Joanna Powell Colbert. And this edition that I'm showing is the Llewellyn edition. So the first position, again, is one way that I make my insecurity the burden of others. And so we draw the cards. As I have done across the board, I really do recommend shuffling, gathering the cards back up and shuffling between each spread, because I think that when repeat cards show up, they're really interesting. So in this example, we have the Four of Water, the Ace of Fire, and the Seeker. So that would be the Four of Cups, the Ace of Wands, and the Fool. And so the question is, what's one way I allow my insecurities to become the burden of those I love, or the burden of others? And in this case, I think that Four of Water really made me go, yeah, we know that one. The Four of Cups in the Rider-Waite-Smith world has such an apathetic attitude about it. And I just look at this example as sort of just being in a mood. When I'm in an insecure mood, I look at the Four of Cups in this case as like a great distillation of insecurity. So when I'm in an insecure mood, it sparks the desire in me. That would be the Ace, sparking the desire, Ace of Fire, to just walk away from it, the Fool, to just go in and not deal with it. So when I'm in an insecure mood, for example, it sparks a desire within me to just get away from it and not deal with it. So I don't deal with it, I go wandering. I go trying to distract myself from it. The reason I didn't choose this deck for this reason, but the reason that I'm glad I did choose this deck for this spread is because actually a lot of the cards have a pretty positive vibe to them. You know, this is a much gentler deck in a lot of ways than the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, say. So I like that the cards have a gentle quality. I like that the Fool shows up because we've made the Fool very positive in a lot of modern readings. But if we're doing shadow work, we have to remember that even the positive cards are sitting in shadow. They're exploring our shadow. So even though, for example, the Ace of Fire and the Fool are often really great positive cards, in this case, they're exploring a shadow side. And so they're not negating the shadow. And it's important if you're doing this kind of work to make sure that you're not saying, oh, well, when I'm, looking at the Four, when I'm in a bad mood, I just spark up some hiking. And that's how I deal with it. No, that's not what this is saying. This isn't letting you off the hook. You know what I mean? This is saying, look, when you're in a mood, when you're feeling that way, you're sparking a desire within you to just get away from it rather than stay in that state and deal with it. So that's the first position. Now, the second position is one impact of my security on others. You could revise this to be in relation to someone specific in your life. So you could say my children, my parents, my partner, my students, my, whoever, my friends. And in my case, it is frequently my friends who are accepting, and I think that's something that's key, is they're frequently accepting the burden of my insecurity, and I allow that to happen. So that's what I'm trying to do in this case, is to retake the burden and give my friends a break, so to speak. So the second position, again, one impact of my insecurity on others, and in this case we get the Explorer of Earth, the Four of Fire, and the Eight of Air. So that would be the Knight of Pentacles, the Four of Wands, and the Eight of Swords. So in this case, the Knight of Pentacles, or the Explorer of Earth, becomes the others. They become the person that we're talking about in this reading. We force them to do the knighting, to do the exploration, the hunting, the protecting. So they literally have to go looking for a practical way. So go looking for practical, that's the Explorer of Earth. way to stabilize my moods. So that would be the 4 fire, right? Because 4 is stability, at least the way that I've come to think of it. And fire, of course, is passions, and I'm taking that to mean moods in this case. To stabilize my fire and to remind me of my passions, remind me of my, you could look at it in that way too, to bring me back to the things I love. If you think of a more traditional 4 of wands, there's a very celebratory way of looking at that card. So then it becomes to make me feel good, to make me feel celebratory, and then to where am I going? Oh, the 8 of air, to make me do the work, the intellectual work to get me out of the funk. Now, you again, if you were looking at a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, to save me from feeling trapped in my head. This card doesn't really give you that sense. And 8s are about work, and swords are, or air is about the intellect, so the intellectual labor. So that becomes there. They do the work to make me feel good, to stabilize my passion, to stabilize my mood, to celebrate me, and to make me, and to do the work for me of dealing with the intellectual battle that is really the source in many ways of insecurity. So they become the knight in shining armor who is trying to find ways in life to make me feel good and stabilize my mind and keep me from getting stuck in my head. And certainly that's what we do for friends, but that's not their job all the time. And so it's a good thing to look at. This is what they're doing for me because I've placed it in their lap. And because they love us, the people in our lives, they say, okay, I'm going to be that knight in shining armor for you, which is fine. And sometimes we need that. But again, this is about exploring how we can recenter our insecurities and deal with them ourselves rather than making them something other people have to deal with. All right. So that's the second position. The third position is one way I can take accountability for my insecurities. So what this is about really is re-owning, taking responsibility again for our insecurities rather than making them someone else's problem. So in this position, we have the 9 of Earth, which would be the 9 of Pentacles, the Explorer of Fire, which would be the Knight of Wands, and the 3 of Air, which would be the 3 of Swords. So in this case, I love the 9 of Earth, or the 9 of Pentacles, because we have to come back to ourselves. We have to come back to our lives. If we think about the Fool there in that original position of how I do this, how I allow this to happen, the Fool goes wandering. And the 9 of Pentacles, or the 9 of Earth here, says, no, you got to come back to yourself. You got to come back and be with yourself in your life, in that state, and you have to do the work. You become the knight in this case. In the last position, we were making our loved ones the knight. We have to do it. We have to find within ourselves the fire, the enthusiasm to solve these problems and to grow our way of thinking. The 3 of Air is 3s are growth, Air, of course, thinking. This is a deck in particular that does not take the Rider-Waite-Smith road when it comes to the 3 of Swords, which I appreciate. And actually, I really like this particular image because this is a person sort of doing the intellectual labor, growing themselves, learning. So this person's journaling. They're learning. They're growing. 3 is the result of 1 and 2 coming together and producing something, and that makes something new. So in order to take responsibility for my insecurity again and take the burden off my loved ones, then I need the 9 of Earth. I need to come back to myself, come back to my life, come back to my daily world and do that work myself. I have to light the fire in myself to deal with my insecurities, and I need to find a way to stimulate my mind and change my way of thinking, expand or grow my way of thinking so that I approach my insecurity from a different place. So that's the third position. The fourth position is one way that I can secure my insecurity, which is in essence, how do I start releasing that? And I love this. So in the second position, when we were talking about the burden we're placing on others, we had the Explorer of Earth as our friends. Now it's returned and it's us. We have to do that work ourselves. We become our own knight in shining armor. But remember, this position is about how we begin to release it. And that means we have to look for the practical methods. We have to look for the practical daily ways in which we feel secure. This is about securing our insecurities. So we have to do some hunting, we have to do some gathering, and we have to explore the source. We have to explore what it is we're after. we have to own our place. I think the justice card says, look, you're in the right place. So whatever insecurities you have, wherever you are, you're still in the right place, the just place. That's the right place to be. So if whatever you're doing, whether it's at work, in your relationship, in your creative life, whatever, the justice card says, look, you're in the right place. You belong here. So you have to do the work of daily life and making yourself realize you are where you belong. And the magician wonderfully helps us manifest that energy. It helps us take the internal and make it into productive energy. So it tells us that we have to find the magic within and not rely on external validation. We have to find the validation inside ourselves, because if we're constantly searching for validation externally, then we're never going to get it. We're never going to get enough of it. It becomes like an addiction. We have to manifest what's inside. We have, all the time we hear the magician saying, the magician has everything he needs. The magician has everything she needs. It's all in there. We're in the right place. We've gotten where we are. So it's up to us to do the work of looking around and exploring. And this particular explorer of wands, like down there in the dirt, we have to get down there in the dirt and do the work and feel around and say, these are all the reasons I'm in the right place. I have everything I need. I belong here. And I'm going to manifest that energy and produce, rather than take my insecurity and make other people handle it for me. I'm going to own that, and I'm going to use the energy that insecurity eats up and make it into something productive, because the magician transforms unusable energy into something usable. So, and then the final position is how we check our progress. And this is something I love to do in spreads like this, where it's about our development. How do we know we're making progress? And I really do love this array of cards here. So we have the Elder of Water, which would be the King of Water. We have the Child of Air, which would be the Page of Swords, rather. And then, did I say the King of Cups would be the Elder of Water. Child of Air would be the Page of Pentacles, and the Eight of Water would be the Eight of Cups. So I love the combination of the Elder of Water and the Child of Air. You know that your progress is, you know that you're making progress because you are being both emotionally intelligent and intellectually innocent. And this is such a great, the King of Cups, or whatever that position is, to me is the height of emotional intelligence in the deck. They are the master of emotional intelligence. They have been through the stuff. They've done the healing. They've done the work. They know how to care for themselves and for others without giving too much. The Page of Pentacles, or the Child of Air, looks and thinks with innocence. And so it's not about prejudging everything. It's not about saying, oh, everyone hates me. I'm not good enough. I'm not right. I'm not in the right place. They look with curiosity at the world. And so the combination of emotional intelligence and intellectual innocence, I think, is really beautiful. And so you start to feel the balance between those two things. And you're doing the work. You're doing the emotional labor, which eights, again, are. And water, of course, is emotions. You're moving forward. You're moving on. You're leaving the insecurities behind. If you think of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith image, you're leaving those empty cups behind and moving on to something new. And so that's how you check your progress. You feel both emotionally intelligent, intellectually innocent, and you're doing the work, and you're getting better, and you're moving on. So I think that's a really actually lovely demonstration of this. And in many ways, I think this is kind of a universal reading. I think we could, even though I didn't do this for myself, I think we could all take something from this. But we can all also benefit, I think, from doing the individual work as well. So just one more time, here's the positions. And I hope you try this. Let me know if you do. I'm always up for like video responses to this or comments on this. What I don't want to do is make a voyeuristic experience. And again, I want to underscore the fact that insecurities are real. We all feel them. We all have them. And this isn't about beating ourselves up. It's about exploring the ways in which our behaviors impact others. And I think certainly if we can't deal with our insecurities for our own benefit, if we look at the way they're impacting other people, we may benefit from, or we may find ways to heal ourselves by looking at the way they're impacting others. So if I can't save myself, for example, at least I can save the other people. If I can't do the work because I'm good enough at the moment, then I can do the work because other people in my life are good enough to not have to deal with those things. So that is that. So hope this is interesting, and I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll talk soon.